Alright, good morning everyone. So, as you've all been told, I'm James. So, I work for Aristi. I'm a cybersecurity consultant, and what that means is, in my day job, I go out to clients. It's both public, private sector, so schools, small businesses, anything really. And we test the security of their network, and then tell them how, we've exploited any vulnerabilities, and how to fix them. And so, ultimately, your security, your data, is, well, it's my job, ultimately. So in this presentation, we'll quickly go over a few things. So I'll talk about a few bits in a second. A lot of it is just about getting the essentials right, as it says there. I'll tell you a bit about penetration testing, a bit more about why I do what I do and how. And I believe due to technical difficulties, no demonstration, sadly. So anyway, let's get right into it. So the first thing you've got to consider, really, is what are your legal obligations? Obviously, GDPR is very big. It's one of the newer bits of legislation. The Data Protection Act, I believe, is like 1998. So GDPR is quite new. People are very worried about it. There's all sorts of consequences. So we'll talk about that in a bit. We'll talk a bit about why you, as a school or a business, in this case, schools, would be targeted maybe, and how that would be done. What malicious actors are out there that might attempt to exploit any vulnerabilities. And then I have some principles of good ways that you can help yourselves be secure. Now, normally I'd go into a bit more detail on that, but I've been told you're all quite tech savvy, so I'll cut that down a little. So, what are your school's obligations? Under GDPR, as you all know, Principle F, must ensure you have appropriate security measures in place to protect the data that you hold. So obviously, you stop and think about that for a second. Schools hold a lot of personal data. Okay, you've got all the data about your students and whatever, private issues they may have, all sorts of things like that. And you've got to think, you'll have your data on there, staff data, and it's all very, very important. And, there are very big fines for GDPR. But why would someone even want your data in the first place? So, the biggest instance of people who try and steal data, it's often done by opportunists. So not people who are, because a lot of people think, why would anyone target me? Why would anyone be particularly interested in what I have? And the answer is, a lot of times, they're not. It's simply a case of opportunity. There are tools that exist on the internet that allow you to search and find vulnerable machines that are facing the internet that you can exploit. And ultimately, if your devices, your network's found wanting, someone may take that opportunity to take your data, and whether they'll sell it somewhere or whether it'll come back, they'll try and blackmail you or something to consider. So there have been instances, particularly with businesses that hold data. There's been organized crime, so there are hackers for hire on the dark web. We've had instances of effectively journalists hiring these people to steal data about people so they can write a sensationalist article. And you have to consider the implications of that, because for example, schools particularly, if there's some sort of story with teachers, or you don't want to have your data be breached by these people. So you've also got to consider more internal threats, so pupils. Now hopefully all of your machines will be locked down very nicely, and that shouldn't be an issue, but again, it's something you've got to consider. Pupils oftentimes want to get up to a bit of mischief and mess about on the computers. So you need to have your command prompt locked down and make sure that, do you have a USB policy that stops them from bringing things in from home? Because consider, if they have an infected machine at home and they bring in their own devices, can that spread onto your network? Are you prepared for that? And of course, there are ex or disgruntled members of staff. So maybe not particularly for schools, but the example I always give is you've got to remember that Edward Snowden, there's big leaks a few years back. He was a disgruntled NSA, CIA operative, and got passed over for promotion a few times. Bit of a narcissist. He didn't like that, so he took the data to an enemy state. And now he's hiding out in Siberia or something. So I doubt anything as extravagant as that will happen in your schools, but it's something to consider if a member of staff maybe might have personal reasons for taking data. Are the controls there to make sure that they can't just exfiltrate information without it being known? So in terms of what I was talking about with opportunists, a lot of times, obviously we would all, particularly from my point of view as a security consultant, I would love for you all to be as secure as you can be at all times. However, as it stands, when it comes to opportunists, it's the old case of you don't need to be faster than the bear, just the other campers. So if maybe you're not perfect, but if you have less vulnerabilities than other people, there's a good chance that they'll be targeted before you. So it is a bit of a race, really, to make sure that you're up to date. So that's a bit about why you might be targeted or who might want to target you. So how might they do it? So, of course, consider external-facing machines, things that run patched. That's a big one because developers are in an arms race with hackers all the time. Hackers find issues and exploits that they can take, and the developers patch it out. Right? They're quite literally patching the holes hackers used to get in. So it's an arms race all the time, new exploits and updates that fix those. But if you're not updating, if you're behind that curve, then it's very easy for people to find old, tried and tested methods for, maybe you're using an old version of Windows. There's many old methods that they can use, a big old toolbox full of stuff that they can attack you with. So it's very important to be on top of that. So another one is security misconfiguration, because it's all very well and good having the latest software, the latest this and that. It's great having a front door with 10 different locks. It's big and sturdy. But if you leave it wide open, what's the point of it? So not only do you need to make sure that you have everything up to date and that it's secure, but you need to make sure that it's configured correctly. So thinking about things like firewalls, are the ports that you have open, or are they all necessary? If you're not running a service on some of these ports, would they be better off being shut? Because does it increase the attack surface by which someone might launch an attack at you and leverage your systems? So of course there's also social engineering techniques such as phishing. I'm sure you're all aware of what that is, people sending emails and pretending to be other people. It's quite successful a lot of times, sadly. But in schools, for instance, teachers, oftentimes, you'll have your internal emails, but teachers will sign up for newsletters and all sorts. So there's still a lot of emails from different places that could come in. And the issue with that is that, sure, they might sign up to things that that aren't spam. But as, we all know, companies do sell data. So when you put in your email address and sign up for services, a lot of times they will sell that onto other companies, and that gets passed through to a point where someone has that information of your email address, it gets added to a spam list, and you get sent some sort of lewd advert for something. But luckily our email clients are very, very good at removing the spam. But it's still an issue, because if someone gets a hold of your addresses, particularly with open source intelligence, for example. So there are tools that exist that allow you to, LinkedIn, who here has LinkedIn? Right, that's quite a few of you. Okay, it's great, it's a good business, very professional networking site, but it's very easy to scrape information. LinkedIn particularly is a big one. And what that means ultimately is if I want to target someone or somewhere, there are tools where I can put in the end of an email at suchaschool.co.uk or .ac.uk, and it will come back with all that information on LinkedIn, and I can find out who you are and oftentimes your position. So think about if you're on there and your boss is on there, and I can see both of you, I can see what your positions are. Maybe I want to get you to do something, I can fake an email as your boss. I'll find out who your boss is, fake an email. It's something to consider. Even though you might think, well, why would anyone want to target me? How? The information, it's possible to take it, and people will, through opportunity, try and attack you. So that's externally. Thinking more internally, as I touched upon before, think about USB devices, very commonly used in schools, teachers, students, everyone. And it's always a bit of a concern, and people have USB chargers, they're plugging in their phones now, even just to charge, but you can still access the files. So that's another, again, that increases the attack surface, because if someone brings in an infected device, do you have the controls on your network to mitigate the damage and to make sure that something malicious won't spread or exfiltrate your data? So it's a bit squashed, isn't it? Anyway, so the 4 principles that I have, I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, But passwords is a big one. So the main principles here for passwords is that ideally they need to be unique for every account you make. This is one that people really don't like because they don't like remembering lots of passwords, which is very understandable. They need to be strong, not obvious or guessable. So it's great if you have a nice password policy that says you need capitals, you need numbers, but if you still put in password 1 with a capital P, it's still no good because it's easily guessable. It's some of the first things that people try. And like I said, people can't be bothered to manage a lot of passwords, particularly long, strong, and unique ones, because this is when things get out of hand and people start writing them down on post-it notes, sticking them to the monitors. It's not ideal. So what I would recommend is use a password manager. These are great bits of software. They can go right into your browser with plugins. They'll save your passwords. They can generate them, particularly, which is the most useful thing, because they are very long, seemingly random characters, very strong, and you don't have to remember it. So that's a good takeaway, password managers. And also two-factor authentication. So obviously the idea behind a password is to access something, you're required to give something that you know. But what two-factor authentication deals with, it's not just something you know, your password, but something you have, which is your phone. Because you link your device, when you want to log in, you get sent a code. So if someone did manage to guess your password, if they haven't got your phone, they're out of luck. And I think we can all agree that would be fantastic when someone on the other side of the planet has cracked your account, they think they've got into it, but if they haven't got your mobile phone, which again is on the other side of the planet, you're okay. Oftentimes these come with alerts that tell you tried logging in. And that's when you can see, I've had emails before where someone's attempted to log into your account so many times, have exceeded the retry limit. Is this you? No, it's not me. So it's very useful to have all this to know that you will be secure with two-factor authentication, and password managers are the big one. So again, we talked about patching, we talked about that arms race, the developers and hackers all the time, new exploits, fixing the exploits. They don't always get it right. Sometimes patches do release new vulnerabilities and they go at it again. But you always need to be ahead of the curve. So does everyone remember the WannaCry attacks on the NHS? I think a couple of years ago now. It was big headline news. Big bucks of money were lost. What's interesting about that issue was that the patch for the exploit that was leveraged to total all these systems was released a few months prior. I think it was like 2 months prior. So if the NHS was up to date at the time of the incident, nothing would have happened. But sadly, as we know, they're struggling, they're running on old systems that aren't up to date, and ended up incurring probably far much more, monetary cost than it maybe would have to make sure that it was set up correctly in the first place. So another point is protection. What do I mean by that? I mean dedicated protection, things like good antivirus, or if you've got a big network, some sort of network monitoring. Logs in particular are a big one. I've been to places where we had a security incident and they brought us in to sort of try and piece together what's gone on. I sat down with some people, I said, right, have you got any firewall logs? No. Got any USB logs? No. And there's hardly anything we could do. Logs are extremely important. So I haven't got the fact on the slides, but the average time it takes to detect a security incident, I think it's something like 240. I'll find it for you afterwards, but it's a long time. About 2/3 of a year it takes for someone to discover that an incident has occurred. So this isn't, how you'd think you'd find it within a couple of hours, but that isn't sadly the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is almost a year down the line, someone finds a log file while looking for something, goes, hang on a minute, what's that? Oh dear, that's an external address. So the last one is people. So ultimately that's whether your staff are aware, because again, your phishing emails, are people aware of that threat, the danger that can be posed? Because people are very trusting a lot of times of things that look legit. So if we know that danger is out there, people will hopefully check it out a bit more before they do click some dodgy links. And well, another point is it's great to have good policy in place and say, okay, we've got this policy, it's all sorted. But if the attitude of the employees, of your staff towards it, if they, it's great saying that you have to have a unique password for every account, it has to be this, it has to be that. But if people aren't interested, they won't do it. And so part of maintaining good security is maintaining people's effective mean, complicity is probably not the right word, but that they're on board with it effectively, because it can be a pain sometimes. We have got an account that's have to go through two layers of two-factor authentication. It is a bit of a pain, but it is secure. You have to make sure that everyone is on board with it, because if they're not, they won't do it. Like I said, they simply won't, and you won't be secure, despite the fact that on paper it says you are, and you'll be scratching your head when an incident occurs. So here's a great little site. I shan't do it now in the interest of time, but ultimately what this is, it's a tool that allows you to check whether your email has been in any dumps. So businesses have data breaches all the time. Big one. LinkedIn, again, is a big one. If any of you have LinkedIn, there's a good chance if you put your email address into the site, your email address will come back in a dump. And ultimately, what this shows is if your information has been leaked. So you can find these, like I said, dumps, places where people have had servers full of data exposed and it's been taken. This is oftentimes sold or otherwise leaked for people to add you to that spam list. And oftentimes it's not just emails, it's passwords as well, which really dials in what I said previously about it being unique for every account. Because if someone had your email and your password, if you use the same password for every account, how they can access everything? Which is a bit of a sobering thought. So, in regards to patching, I'm sure we're all familiar with that. So what do you think when you see Windows patching? It's not positive, is it? You don't think, oh, fantastic, new patch, bit of performance increase, new features. No, we don't want anything like that. We just want to get back to work. People are busy. We have things to do with our day other than sit around and watch Windows finish. Everyone thinks Windows is incredibly annoying when it comes to patching. I don't know anyone that that doesn't hate it. But what you've got to consider is Windows tells you when it's out of date and it needs to update. Annoying as it is, but let's think about the programs that don't tell you that it needs to update. When was the last time you updated your Java or your Adobe Acrobat reader? Because this sort of software does contain exploits that can be used, but it doesn't say, I need to update, please update me, the same way that Windows does. So oftentimes, when we're out in the scanning networks, this is neglected. It's particularly important to make sure on all the devices, because all it takes is one. If you're patching a whole room of computers, if you miss one, that could be an in. So there we go. To summarize, make each password unique for each account, make them nice and strong. I'd recommend using a password manager because that can generate strong passwords, it remembers them for you, you won't have to write them down. Patching, again, it's an arms race, developers, hackers, you need to be ahead of the curve. So, it lowers vulnerabilities, sometimes adds features, it's good to be on top of. Protection, make sure you've got good antivirus in your environment. Make sure things are configured correctly, gateways, firewalls. Like I said, if you've got a port open, you aren't running a service on that port that's required, close it. And of course, people. So are staff aware of things like phishing? Are they on board with the policy in place? Or are they just going to sort of look at each other and a bit of a wink and just go about their day without following procedure? So in terms of penetration testing, why would you want a penetration test? Which, as I previously discussed, is where I go about to your site and have a look at your network and assess the vulnerabilities, how they can be exploited and how you fix them. So, as it says on the slide, you use both manual and automated testing. The key is that you're aware of things before they're used against you. That's the big one, because I'm not going to steal your data, but someone else might. And it's worth paying to make sure that it's secure, because while it may cost, what will probably cost more is having an incident. People are definitely frightened of incidents because media gets involved and oftentimes, and GDPR, data protection, is big fines. So it's something to take very seriously. You don't want to chance it. And as it says on the slide there, provides a clear, in-context view of your network. So what's interesting about that is oftentimes there will be vulnerabilities. Well, it's impossible to escape vulnerabilities because ultimately we need to do stuff. And to do anything, ultimately a level of security must be compromised. And so it's not just an automated assessment of, you have this vulnerability, this is how severe it is. It's within the context of your business and the network itself. So if you have to have, something open, a port open that's, maybe you're running a protocol version that can be exploited, but you require it for some important software for your business, we can talk about that risk and you can accept it and accommodate around that the steps to improve your security while accepting that risk. So that's a lot more than what you'd get from just automated scanning. As it says, it's in context of your business, of your school, of your network. It's bespoke, effectively, in that sense. The report that you'll get at the end that lists to you how to fix things. So there are some certs that we also, what's the word? Well, effectively we can say this. So Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus, the government-backed schemes, industry supported, and effectively Cyber Essentials Plus, a auditor will come in and assess the points. There are 5 controls mainly. So with Cyber Essentials, you fill out a questionnaire ultimately and send that in, and as long as that's correct, you can pass. However, with Plus, it's done by it's independently assessed ultimately, which makes it much more highly regarded. And these are good things to have, because particularly if you're a business, in this instance you're at your schools, but it shows that you take your security seriously and that you are secure ultimately and that you've been independently assessed. It's a little badge of honour, if you like, and it's worth having. So as we said, the demonstration is sadly not going on. So there's I think, what time is it? But questions during the break with refreshments. I'm perfectly happy for anyone to come and ask any sort of questions. We can have a discussion about that. And Wave9 sponsored us, so thank you very much to Wave9. And that's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Vulnerabilities and what have you. James would be happy in the break if you want to come in. He'll be with us on the Wave9 stand. If you want to come too, and we can set up his laptop on the table here, and he can talk you through some stuff and give you a bit of a demonstration. So you don't miss out on that, because it's good stuff. All right, thank you. Thanks.
Great. Cheers, Andy. Tony?
I was actually just going to say, partly to waste a bit of time for Michael, I was just going to say, what are the most common things that you're finding in schools? Is it just patches?
Patches are the big ones.
I was going to say, do you want to use the mic that be easier for folks to see on the camera?
Certainly.
As well?
It's a big one, because up-to-date things don't have as many, nowhere near as many exploits that can be taken advantage of. So patching is the big one. Things are out of date everywhere we go. So it's not just schools, it's businesses, public, private sector, it doesn't matter. Almost everything's out of date. So that's the big one.
Are you finding it's more software patching?
Both. Windows builds are very often, so people haven't got Windows up to the latest version. So, well, it's not even just, having Windows 10 not updated for a while, it's not having Windows 10. A lot of people still run Windows 7, still run, Windows 8. And, like the exploit I was going to show you, I'll talk a little bit about it actually, because effectively what I was going to show you was the exploit used in, as I mentioned, the NHS WannaCry ransomware. And effectively what that is, it's patched in Windows, so it's an operating system issue. And effectively, what I wanted to impress upon you with the demonstration is that the tools used for it are free, they're open source, and they're not difficult to use. So if I get a big terminal up and start typing, it might look a bit technical, but ultimately they aren't difficult tools to use. And that's what's scary about it, is it's free to download, it's not hard to find. Anyone who wants to invest a few hours can learn how to use it and start leveraging vulnerabilities, particularly the one I'll show you, the WannaCry exploit MS17010. It's very dangerous, and ultimately that goes to show the importance of patching. Particularly because, like I said, the NHS itself hadn't patched, and at the time of the attack, the fix was there for 2 months or so. It could have been very different if things were up to date. We don't want that to happen to you.
So, are you seeing? So we all know that it's very widely known by Microsoft that XP support has ended, Windows 7 will end, and so on. That's thrust in the face of many network managers, and they've got stuff that they can take to their senior leadership, to their heads, to actually get money to pay for upgrades. What are you finding around hardware infrastructure, the switches, the access points and things like that? Because that's quite often forgotten about completely. So what are you finding there? Is that still common? Are people using really legacy kits still?
Yeah, people do use old hardware, and like you said, because a lot of people, who hire up, they take the impression, well, it works, doesn't it? Well, why do you want to change it? Leave it. It doesn't need any money. But people use old protocols, SSL instead of TLS and stuff that can be vulnerable. And well, that's another good reason to have a pen test. Is oftentimes it's the evidence you need to get a bigger budget, effectively. Because again, people take the stance: if it's not broke, don't fix it. But like I've said many times now, it is an arms race, and it's not enough to just it works, don't touch it, because you need to continually make sure that you are up to date, not only with software but with standards as well.
I know from a personal perspective, having served on a trust board, in a situation where you've got multi-academy trusts and you've got a group of people who ultimately feel responsible for data security in a board, I think when building a business case for investment in IT infrastructure, if you want to change anything, I think James is right that, well, why do you want to change it? Because it works and we can make do for another 12 months with that. I think they're really alive to security. It's always been safeguarding, hasn't it? Been a number one priority in schools and still is. But I think security is becoming a massive thing because of the reputational damage it can do to multi-academy trusts or local schools if it hits the news or what have you. And also the implications of GDPR. So, it is something that I think is going to increase in terms of how high it rises on your school leadership's agenda, because it's going to be a big concern for trust boards and governors in terms of risk.
And going back to what you said about hardware, it isn't, just things like switches. A lot of times places have ancient servers running, Windows 2003 server, and we sort of look at it, oh dear. And we asked the admins about it. It was like that when I got here. I don't want to turn it off. Oh, no, we're okay. And that another big problem is because ultimately you think the attitude of, well, surely set it up correctly once, make sure that you can get on top of it, keep things up to date, and it'll be great. But sadly, that's not the reality, because a lot of people come into jobs, looking after systems that have already been looked after by someone else who's retired, and they inherit a mess. And to change it all round is just too much. So it's not enough to just say, oh well, just get it right the first time. As you said, security it's an ongoing. It's not static. It's moving all the time.
Sorry, I'm asking lots.
No, it's all right. If anyone else wants to ask any questions, I suppose we're doing it now. You may as well hop on the bandwagon.
Actually, I'm not sorry. Being honest, when being ex-LA, one of the things that was always a concern as more and more schools move away from LA connections, so RBC connections, and do them themselves or going with third-party providers. There was always that concern about, okay, you may have someone coming in, or the school themselves may test it internally. Who's actually keeping an eye on
the managed IT and things?
So, when you do the penetration testing, is it purely internally, or do you do external attacks as well?
Well, with pen tests, we do internal and external tests. So, what you're thinking of is an external infrastructure test.
Yep.
So ultimately what we do is, you sign the form that says these are the IPs that we're allowed to check. We sit in the office and we'll see what people from the outside can see from your network. And then obviously we'll get that to you, but then the internal is obviously we will come in on site. So if you have managed IT that's done by a third party, for instance, if you want us to look at those systems, you will have to go and get permission from them for the form so that we can access those systems legally.
Are you seeing much difference between schools that run things themselves purely themselves? So basically they've got a line and they have their own firewall, little bits and pieces, compared to those that actually go with service providers?
Well, you would imagine that the service providers obviously do keep things quite neat and tidy. However, there have been issues with providers before now. So there was one engagement where there was a default admin account left by the third party. So it had default credentials, it had admin rights, and I'm not going to get into the technical details of it, but we got these details through a common technique, recycling, and took those credentials, logged into a server 2003, and then used it to dump all of the usernames, all of the passwords of everyone in the Active Directory. So, in terms of is managed IT better? Obviously, it's it's less hassle for the school itself, and it's set up to, because they're selling you a product ultimately, so it is set up to a nice standard, but they still make mistakes.
Let's think more about the broadband providers.
Broadband
Are you finding that, like I'm excellent, another fellow here, are you finding that they're actually doing their work, they're getting the penetration tests sorted out themselves, or are they looking after the schools?
I don't think James, Aristi haven't got a huge amount of experience in schools. They're starting on this journey with us really, and part of the reason for getting here today was Wave9. We sort of operate with a gateway service and an internet access for reasons that we have to discuss. There's lots of sensible reasons to do that, and other people have different opinions about cloud service offerings. And our view is, the gateway device, well managed, is the right way, whether that's in turn managed by a school or by us. And we're starting to roll out pen testing as part of our service, so that you've got some good assurance around the service itself and your gateway elements. And there's obviously optional bits around having your internal network looked at and whatever other bits as well. Because you're right, I think that the key thing to have really in terms of GDPR and assurance and the risk from a governance perspective is good visibility of your status. So you might have vulnerabilities, you might have issues, you might need some money to fix things, but you need to know where you are. And if you've outsourced lots of stuff and local authority back in the day felt like a safe place to be, lots of places it wasn't really a safe place to be, but schools had comfort and ultimately didn't have as much obligation as academies and trusts do today. And so that's why we're keen to make sort of assurance and security as much part of the service as the filtering and safe and good internet access really. So which is why we're sort of partnering with the Aristi around pen testing and cyber essentials, which is a good base level really, as I'm sure for it.
I just chip in as well, it's one of the larger trusts. We've just invested into our own staff being trained up in cyber essential security in recent months, because we are looking very closely at penetration testing in-house, because we've got multiple schools moving forward to get some people trained up for that. But it is, when you get a pen test up of a school and look at reports, it's amazing how weak the systems are.
Yeah, I think
weak Wi-Fi, weak servers, everything from edge, cloud, everything is looking at and testing. And our experience of hardening up is step by step. So find an issue, you share that best knowledge and practice about how to resolve it. But still, our biggest vulnerability is staff training. We've got some like 10,000 teachers and support staff across the organisation, and trying to keep them aware of what those vulnerabilities are, and they still will share usernames and passwords. That is our key threat on a day-by-day basis to the organisation, as well as non-encrypted USB sticks, which are still here.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's very important to let your staff all know what the risks in and policy regarding it. So, like you said, people still sharing, credentials. It's not ideal because ultimately, if you write them down, often, we don't just do the computers. Oftentimes, we can do a physical security review. So, the more exciting engagements, you sign off, and we can do what's called social engineering techniques. There you go. And effectively, what that includes is most people don't know we're going to be there. We rock up, we sort of lie our way into the building or whatever. Ask to be, we're seeing so and so, and then walk off, see where we can plug in, what data we can take away, and whether anyone tries and stops us, which is quite fun. And ultimately, if it's possible for people to do things like that, like you're saying, if teachers are just shouting across the room, oh yeah, it's this. Imagine my position if I'm doing one of these tests, and I'm sort of skulking about in your IT room, waiting for a moment to slip in, and you're hearing passwords be shouted about. It's not an ideal environment for security, is it?
I think Andy's point was valid and echoes with what you said, really, though, around, the big challenges in schools is the lack of funding around IT. You inherit a school or you're part of the trust and you get new schools added. If it's new build, it's not so bad, it's all nice and shiny, but if you inherit something that's in a bit of a state, you're trying to get it to a steady state, and if you have a pen test on one side, you get it, the situation's stable, and it's quite a good and a secure network. You need to replicate that across, and it's a good tool to use to have assurance, whether it's Cyber Essentials, GDPR, and the pen testing, to use as a message to management that says, look, we've got this side, we've got a standard, we've got a gold build, all the rest of it, we need to roll this out to get the minimum risk we can across the state. As you say, it's an arms race.
I don't think it is a financial issue. I think it is a training issue for the staff on the ground.
For the staff
They
piece,
know
yeah.
what they know. And trying to share good knowledge and practice across to the poor network managers and schools who take the brunt of all the work but never get support and get training.
If only there was a training scheme for IT managers and technicians in schools. Yeah, what was that? Yeah.
But it's a question that I'd probably like to ask you, because I think training is a good one. I'm just wondering, if you sit and there's a training budget in school, how much, and there's the head teacher and senior leaders are looking at allocation of that budget. Does any training, or is there acknowledgement that training budget needs to find its way to the IT team? And I don't think there is. I've never heard it discussed. You've got people going on all sorts of curriculum courses and hear speakers and what have you. I don't see a lot in schools of training for IT. What I do see a lot is an expectation set by management that IT is a single block, and they wouldn't have a geography teacher teaching history regularly, but they expect an IT person to know about network, security, server, desktop, applications. Anything with a plug on it, effectively, becomes IT. And it's a real challenge, isn't it? Being able to, what you want to do, what you'd like to do, the things that you need to do, but actually getting that message heard can be a challenge, I think. That's why I say almost sort of playing the safeguard, it's a real risk, but playing the safeguarding stroke security thing might make people's ears prick up a bit more. And again, I take the point with school staff. I said earlier about switching it over to a data security with lead. The last thing a teacher wants to do is give away information about a child or pupil that puts that pupil at risk. So actually, data security from a safeguarding perspective with teaching and support staff is probably a good one, because they might recognise that.
I think some of Tony's fund for his next session, the GDPR has been a great whipping stick for getting some provision, some money, but again, depends where it's led.
Yes.
I look at the schools we're taking on, and they're absolutely abysmal. I mean, I'm doing 72,000 free set up because I need to run 16-bit software or 32-bit software. And it's just a nightmare for those schools because they don't know better. And a lot of it is, say, third-party support going in, not advising schools. But again, it's that communication and knowledge issue. I mean, how many schools do I still go into where I see schools without encrypted laptops? I mean, that's been a basic tenet that's been pushed up GDPR for 18 months as absolute basic tenets. And I'm still seeing schools going in there and the devices are not locked down. They're still not encrypted. And I know there's a communication issue. And finance is great to get people on courses, and I say we've invested in 2 people to do those courses, and they're not cheap, £2,500 a time. But that saves me doing half a dozen tests a year and going out to third party, but it doesn't give me external accreditation. So we get an internal process for that. But there'll always be a position for us to also be tested ourselves by external partners.
Okay, so yeah, just reiterating, a pen test is a great way to get that attention from management, maybe get that budget increase for hardware, or just to raise, the profile of the issue ultimately, because it's not just you badgering people, you have a proper report in front of you that you can point to, that's obviously done by a third party, and it really can highlight the risks that allow you to get done effectively what needs to be done.
I think certainly in an academy, if there's a CFO in a trust, a chief, they will be maintaining the risk register, and if you're bringing to their attention that there could be an issue with IT security either through official testing or just because of your knowledge, it ought to be on that risk register, and it will get discussed. And you've shared that issue. No one will come to you 12 months later and say, why didn't you tell us that was the case, because we would have done something about it, So, it's a good way of highlighting stuff, getting it on the risk register, and then you're sharing that problem with everyone. It's not just a concern for you as an individual.
Okay, well it's 10:22, so I better 23, so I'll best get off. But like I said, during the refreshments coming up, is that 11? Is it? But ultimately, you can ask me questions later during the refreshment section or with all the networking. So if you do have any questions, just feel free to come up to me then. And I'll answer any of your pressing concerns.